Words are not merely sounds. They're not just air pushed through vocal cords, vibrating through the silence. They are, in the most literal and terrifying sense, the architects of reality. And what we often forget, what we deliberately ignore, is that a single sentence can demolish years of dreams. A single phrase can unravel the entire tapestry of your imagined future. She said this, and in those few syllables, everything changed, not because the world outside shifted, but because something inside you did. You see, the words people speak to us, especially those we love, carry enormous psychological weight. When she finally spoke that sentence, it wasn't just a communication of facts, it was a verdict, a culmination. It was the mirror held up to your face with no distortion, and for the first time, perhaps, you saw yourself not as you wished to be, but as you were. That moment is profoundly destabilizing. It's a kind of micro-death. Because the image you had of yourself, the identity you believed in, and the future you thought was secure, was all contained in the words she no longer said. Her silence in some areas, her tone in others, and finally, her chosen words, those told you everything. And that's where the transformation begins, because once you realize that a sentence can shatter your world, you also begin to realize something else just as terrifying, and just as powerful, that a sentence can rebuild it too. But not until you understand its destruction. You have to sit with what she said, not avoid it, not drown it in noise. You have to listen to the pain that sentence brought up, because pain is the most honest voice you'll ever hear. If her words brought you to your knees, it means they struck something true, and the only way out of that moment is to earn the right to stand again. And to do that, you must carry those words, not as a curse, but as a lesson written in fire. Most men run from that kind of truth. They'd rather blame, distract, self-destruct, but the brave ones, the ones who build themselves anew, they etch that sentence into their soul, they wake up with it. Train with it, work with it, heal through it, because they know that every powerful transformation begins with a sentence that cut deep enough to wake the sleeping potential within. So yes, she said this, and that's when you had a choice, break permanently or break open, and begin again. The collapse of illusions doesn't happen all at once. It unravels slowly and then all at once, and her words, they were the final tug on a thread you'd been pretending wasn't fraying. You see, we build these illusions brick by brick, thought by thought, over time. We craft a narrative of love, of security, of permanence. We tell ourselves stories, not necessarily because they're true, but because they keep us safe. Or more accurately, they keep us from confronting chaos. When she said those words, they weren't just an announcement of departure. They were a demolition. They tore through the scaffolding of your carefully constructed reality. Because it wasn't just about her leaving. It was about you seeing, finally and fully, what had been there all along, the cracks, the distance, the disconnection. You just refused to acknowledge it, because accepting it would mean confronting your own blindness. We are so deeply tied to our illusions because they comfort us. They allow us to avoid pain, avoid growth, avoid responsibility, and yet illusions, when held too tightly, become prisons. The tragedy is, we often don't know we're locked inside until someone else opens the door and walks out. Her words may have been simple, even quiet, but their impact was nuclear. You saw the relationship not as it truly was, but as you needed it to be. Maybe you saw her as perfect, or saw yourself as her savior, or believed love alone could fix the gaping holes in both of your hearts. But illusions never hold up under pressure, and when they collapse, they do so violently, and still, the breaking is necessary. Without it, you'd stay asleep. You'd continue pretending. You'd stay in the comfortable lie instead of facing the uncomfortable truth. But the truth is what liberates you. You weren't just grieving the loss of her presence. You were grieving the loss of the fantasy, and that hurts more because the fantasy was your sanctuary. The fantasy was your future. And now it's gone, but maybe, just maybe, it needed to be. Because once illusions fall, reality begins, and that's where real strength is forged. Not in comfort, not in certainty, but in the cold clarity that comes when the dream dies and the real world demands your attention. Her sentence shattered the illusion, and in doing so, gave you your first glimpse of who you could become if you have the courage to face what's real. Responsibility and loss is one of the most brutal and liberating truths a person can face. When she let you go, the first instinct might have been to point fingers, to blame her, to call her heartless, to paint yourself as the victim of betrayal or misunderstanding, but that reaction, though human, is immature. It's avoidance masquerading as justice, because the truth, the real, raw, uncomfortable truth, is that loss demands responsibility. If you're in pain and you're blaming the other person for everything, then you're missing the most crucial opportunity life has just handed you, the opportunity to grow through the wreckage. You see, we often treat heartbreak as something that happens to us, rather than something that also reflects us. You weren't just an innocent bystander in the collapse. You were a participant. Maybe you were too passive. Maybe you stopped listening. Maybe you projected your unhealed wounds onto someone who couldn't carry them. Maybe you neglected yourself so badly trying to keep the relationship alive that you became a shadow of the man she first met. And when she let you go, it wasn't just a rejection of you. It was a reflection of everything that had been ignored, avoided, buried. That's why responsibility is so essential. It doesn't mean self-blame. It doesn't mean wallowing in guilt. It means owning your part in the loss with honesty and strength. Because when you own it, you regain control. You reclaim your agency. You stop being a victim and start becoming someone who can do better next time. Someone who can build something real, not based on illusions or dependency, but on integrity and presence. The pain you feel is the spotlight shining on your deficiencies. And if you don't use that light to illuminate the dark corners of your psyche, your weaknesses, your fears, your unmet potential, then you'll repeat the same cycle with someone else in a different time. But with the same result. Loss is not just a wound, it's an assignment. It demands reflection, action, and courage. Most people ignore it. They run into distractions. They jump into new relationships, hoping to outrun their emptiness. But the emptiness isn't a punishment. It's a signal. It's telling you something vital. There is more work to be done within you. So take responsibility, not to blame yourself, but to reforge yourself. The man you were wasn't enough to keep her. And that's not a condemnation, it's a call to evolve, to examine every broken piece and rebuild with stronger material. You can't control when someone leaves, but you can control who you become after they do. The path forward through chaos is never straight, and it's never obvious. That's the trap most fall into. They expect clarity right after the collapse. They expect to feel purpose the moment they're broken. But when she let you go, what followed wasn't direction, it was disorientation. The future you had envisioned dissolved, the structure, the rhythm, the meaning you attached to each day, it vanished with her absence. And what's left behind isn't order, it's chaos. But here's something most people won't tell you. Chaos is not your enemy. Chaos is the raw material from which new strength is shaped. Chaos is the crucible. It's the place where everything you pretended to be gets stripped away, and the real you, vulnerable, uncertain, but capable, gets the chance to emerge. You'll feel lost, of course you will. Your identity was wrapped around someone who no longer sees you the way you once needed to be seen. That kind of loss feels like death, but death always precedes rebirth, and the path forward starts not with knowing where to go, but with standing still in the storm and refusing to numb yourself. Let yourself feel the chaos. Let the silence scream. Let the night stretch on and press against your chest like a weight you think you can't carry. Because in those moments, something ancient inside you starts to awaken. Not the voice of comfort, not the voice of rescue, but the voice of responsibility. The voice that says, get up, you're still here, build something now, even if it's just one step forward. You'll be tempted to reach back, to text, to explain, to rewind, but that is not forward. That is fear disguised as hope. And your job now is not to hold on, it's to forge on. That means routines, that means discipline, that means rebuilding your mind and your body and your soul with the intensity of a man who knows this. No one is coming to save you. The world doesn't owe you healing. It offers you the tools, the pain, the silence, and says, now build. And what you build next must be built with intention. Your time, your thoughts, your habits, they must become sacred. You don't have to know the final destination. You just have to know that standing still in despair is no longer an option. You're not looking for a path that's already paved. You're carving one with your bare hands. Chaos is the fire that melts the old version of you, but it's also the forge that shapes the next. Keep walking, even when it's dark, even when it's heavy, because every step forward is a step into the man you were always meant to become. The hero's rebirth doesn't begin with applause. It begins in silence. It begins in the quiet wreckage after she let you go, when everything feels uncertain, when no one is watching, and when the weight of who you were collapses under the pressure of who you're meant to be. Most people never reach that moment. They avoid it, they drown it out, they look for distractions, comfort, validation, but you, if you're paying attention, will realize that her departure wasn't just a goodbye. It was an invitation, a doorway, a necessary death before the possibility of resurrection. You have to understand something very deeply here. The version of you that was left behind wasn't destroyed for no reason. He was sacrificed, and sacrifices are made when the current form of something can no longer serve what's coming next. Her absence created space, painful, raw, hollow space, and in that space you now have a chance, not to replace her, but to discover you. This is where your story changes, but only if you rise to meet it. No one's handing you a crown. No one's coming to hold your hand through the fire. You have to choose it. You have to walk through your regret, your fear, your confusion, and say, I will not waste this suffering. That's the birth of a hero, not someone who avoids pain, but someone who transforms through it. Your habits must evolve, your thoughts must be disciplined, your actions must reflect the future you want, not the past you lost. Because heroes aren't born by chance, they're born by choice daily. Every morning you rise and decide to take one more step. Despite the ache, despite the silence, despite the memory of her voice, that's when the rebirth begins. You are not who she left. You are who you decide to become now that she's gone. You don't need revenge. You don't need her to see your growth. You need only this to become so rooted in your mission, so aligned with your integrity, and so in tune with your deeper calling that the old version of you could never survive in this new chapter. The hero doesn't look back and wish it was different. The hero looks forward and realizes that everything had to fall apart for the real journey to begin. Her words, her absence, the loss, it wasn't the end. It was the first spark that lit the fire inside you. This is your rebirth, not in comfort but in purpose, not with promises but with power, not because she stayed, but precisely because she didn't, and so here you are standing at the edge of who you were and who you must now become. She said those words, and yes, they hurt, they broke something, but they also revealed something. They tore down the illusion, exposed your weaknesses, stripped you bare, and in doing so, gave you the rarest of gifts, a clear and honest starting point. You don't rebuild from fantasy, you rebuild from truth, and the truth is, you are still here, beaten maybe, humbled definitely, but alive, and if you're alive, you're not done. You have work to do. Not for her, not to prove a point, but to fulfill the deepest responsibility a man can carry, to become everything you were meant to be. This journey you're on is not about winning her back. It's about never again abandoning yourself. It's about becoming so honest, so disciplined, so grounded in purpose that you never lose yourself in someone else again. Let her departure mark not the end of your worth, but the beginning of your awakening. From this day forward, walk like a man who was broken and chose to rise, speak like a man who has faced the fire and forged his own steel, live like a man who no longer needs saving because he finally decided to save himself. She said this, and that's when she let you go, and that's exactly when you became unstoppable.